What's up, guys? Welcome back to Country Bunkers Trains. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're having a good week. I want to give a big welcome to all the new subscribers here on the channel. Over the past month or so, we've had quite a few newcomers here to the channel. So again, a very big welcome. I hope you're enjoying the videos as well as some of the content here, and I'm happy to have you. This actually leads into today's video. Over the past month or so, I've been receiving quite a few questions through the comments, as well as through email regarding track systems, questions about track, this, that, and the other, all concerning just track in general. I figured today we'd take a look at some of the more popular track systems out here on the market. Now, I do know for some of our longtime viewers, this might seem a little redundant. We've done some track videos in the past, or looked at track in the past, but do bear with me. Like I say, we got a few newcomers here to the channel, and after all, that's the whole point of the channel here, to share experiences here in the hobby. Before we get started, I did want to preface a few things. This video is my own personal opinions and experiences. I by no means am the end-all, be-all. I know for a fact others' opinions and experiences will differ, and I absolutely invite everybody to leave a comment of their experiences below. Help some folks out. I also want to state that there's quite a few track systems available here in the O-Gauge market. We're not going to be looking at all of them. Today we're going to be focusing on what I would call the main or flagship tracks. These are tracks that you can very easily find either at your local store or online. I know there's other makes and manufacturers out there, but again, we're just going to be focusing on the main ones that you can find easily, locally, and like I say, online. And lastly, I want to give a quick shout out to my buddy Tony over at Roundhouse South Trains in Port Orange, Florida. He actually loaned me a couple of pieces of track to use in today's video. It's actually pretty dangerous that one of these pieces of track is here in the train room. It's really got me scratching my chin going, But don't worry, we're safe, we're all good. As much as I might like or love one of these tracks, we're in the middle of redoing the second layout. I don't feel like tearing it all up, but it really does have me curious and wondering. But anyway, what do you guys say we get started? I figured we'd start out with the granddaddy, or the OG, if you will, O-Gauge track system. And that, of course, is good old tubular track. This stuff has been around for forever. Lionel originally introduced this stuff, a century ago? And for many, many years, this was the flagship O-Gauge track. Now, Lionel did quit producing tubular track a number of years ago. However, not to fret, Menards entered the picture, and they began offering and producing tubular track once again. And that's actually what we have here in my hands. There's obviously quite a market out there still for the good old tubular track, as Menards has been selling successfully this track system for many years now. For powering tubular track or getting your wires from your transformer to the track, there's two ways about this that you can go. The old school main way is they have an old lock-on. This is an old Lionel lock-on. You simply sit this on the track and clip it on, and then you run your wires to the two springed eyelets out here. These are a little goobered up, but you get the idea. You run your wires here to the track, and you're good to go. You can, as you see, use these old Lionel lock-ons with the tubular track. A lot of people have mentioned that they weren't able to get theirs to fit. You just have to finagle the clip a little bit. You do got to bend these out a tiny bit, as it does seem the bottoms of the rails are a little bit wider than the original Lionel track. But like I say, you can see it fits on no problem after a little coercing, if you will. The second and probably the best way for like a permanent layout for connecting power to this track would be soldering the wires directly to the rails underneath. This does have a coating on it that you might want to take some sandpaper, or hell, even a screwdriver to scratch off in the areas where you want to solder at, and then just solder your wires directly to the rails themselves. And this works out quite well. This is actually how I do it. A quick note of caution, and this goes for all 3-rail O-Gauge track and engines. When running your wires to your track, your hot or positive wire goes to your inside center rail, and your negative or your neutral goes to your outside rail. And like I say, this goes for all O-Gauge track as well as O-Gauge engines. I just wanted to mention that real quick. Some pros on good old tubular track. The main one being the price. This is the cheapest O-Gauge 3-rail track system that you can get. It's super budget friendly. If you're just starting out in the hobby, or maybe just beginning to build your empire or your layout, this is a system you might want to look at. And hell, even if you don't want to buy it brand new from Menards, you want to pinch a few more pennies, There's so much of this stuff in the secondary market, you can get this stuff for pretty much next to nothing. I've even seen people on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace giving this stuff away for free because they simply want to get it out of their attic or make some extra room. If you're patient and diligent enough, you can amass quite a collection of good old tubular track for next to nothing or pennies on the dollar. This track is super easy to work with. As you can see, you got 3 pins on one side, and those connect into the next piece on the opposite side. And if you need to move these pins, you can simply pull these pins out, usually with a pair of pliers, and slide them into the other side if needed. This track is made out of steel, so of course, good old magnet traction from the post-war engines, as originally intended, works great on this stuff. And being steel with steel pins, this stuff is very stout, very robust. When you connect some track together, it's hard bending or flexing this stuff. This is a good choice for elevated lines if you don't have a lot of supports, because this track has no problem supporting some heavy weight from the engines and cars above it. Our last pro for this track will be subjective, and that would be its looks. If you're doing a post-war inspired or just a classic toy train O-gauge layout, this is the track for you. There's nothing quite like an old post-war layout with some tubular track, except of course maybe for some Super O. But again, that's a video for another day. This is just such a classic track system. It works well with the older or traditional sized equipment. Let's go over some cons of the tubular track. You'll notice some of the pros for this track are actually cons as well, depending upon your use of it and how you're looking to use it. Starting out, as I mentioned with the pros, it's a very robust and sturdy track system. The downside to that, though, if you're doing an intricate track setup where you might need a little bit of flexibility, let's say, you get to your last pieces of track to connect, and one track's over here and the other track's over here, there's not a whole lot of forgiveness or flexibility in this track system. Usually what you have to end up do is custom cutting the different sections of track in order to get everything to fit. Like I say, with these pins, there's just not a whole lot of forgiveness, such as you might find in some of the other track systems that we're about to check out. Something to keep in mind. Another pro that's a con as well is, again, its looks. Although this looks great with the old post-war engines and the traditional style stuff, if you're looking to do a layout or a setup that looks anything remotely realistic, this really isn't honestly the track system you want to use. As you can tell, we only got, 3 ties holding this thing together. Doesn't look very realistic. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people out there that have gone through the trouble of building and installing their own ties in between the ties on this track, and it does look great. But honestly, for me, I think you're light years ahead if you just start out with a different track system rather than going through all that trouble. But hey, some people enjoy that. But for me, that's a con. Our last con for the good old tubular track actually has to do with power. For myself personally, I've discovered that this isn't the best track to get power to your engines. I've experienced a lot of dead spots or low spots with power in the track systems through running the trains. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way that the track connects to one another. As we mentioned and talked about earlier, we got these nice metal pins in here that are nice and tight right now. But after you put your track together and put it down in place, after who knows how many times, countless times, the engine's running over this track, all the vibrations over time begin to bend out, loosen up, and just open up this metal. This causes a weak connection for the pins, resulting in power loss. If you have a large, not necessarily large, but a decent run of track, and you're running your conventional engines, you'll notice as the engines are running, as they get away from wherever your power's coming in at, as they get further away from that, the engines might start dying, losing power, lights going down and whatnot. And that's the reasoning for this. Like I say, I believe the connecting points. The way to combat this is to add more power feeders, or feeder wires as they're called, to more spots on the layout underneath the track or with another lock on. But it's just a little bit more work you got to go through. And that's my biggest con with this stuff personally. Our next track system is Lionel's current modern day track system. This is actually what replaced their old tubular track. And this, of course, is Lionel Fastrack. Some pretty cool stuff. This stuff's been out for a number of years now as well. You'll notice with this track system, it's got this nice built-in plastic roadbed, which is really a nice feature. If you're operating your trains on the carpet, or if you only put your trains up around Christmas time, this is a really nice feature. This keeps the carpet fibers out from the wheels and the gears underneath the engine, as well as keeps all the oil and grease and whatnot from the engine getting on the carpet. A really nice touch. For powering this track, Lionel does sell a separate sale section of track that has a little block on the side with plug-ins to plug your transformer or wall warts into, whichever you prefer. However, if you don't want to go through all of that, you can also connect it on the underside, kind of like tubular track as well. You can use some female spade connectors and slide them onto the pins right here. Or if you want, you can solder directly to it. The choice is yours. Some pros for this fast track system. Honestly, the biggest one in my mind is its availability. This stuff is available everywhere. Anywhere they sell model trains, you'll find this fast track. And it's in abundance. You'll have no issue finding the pieces or that certain piece that you need. Which to me, personally, that's a big deal. That's a big thing nowadays. But yeah, that's honestly, in my opinion, the biggest pro of this track. Another big pro for this track system, for me personally, is its appearance. We have two track systems that we'll be looking at today. This is one of two that has a built-in plastic roadbed, and I think this is the better looking of the two. Personally, I think this is a very sexy looking track setup. But it is. I think it looks great. It looks awesome. Another good pro for this stuff, again, is its easy use. Got a couple pins, the hot and the dead rail or the negative. Just clips together and you're good to go. And again, another one, as we mentioned earlier, is its abundance. This stuff can be found anywhere. If you're putting together an intricate track setup, you're not going to be hung up for a week or so waiting on that special piece of track to show up that you can finish or complete your layout with. Usually within a day, or if you got to order it online, a couple days, you can get the piece you need and you're up and running. Some cons for this fast track. Honestly, my biggest con and my biggest gripe, and probably the biggest reason why you don't see this track system adorning my layouts, is its price. Personally, for its price, I think it's just too expensive for what it is. Yeah, it's nice, but you're really paying for the name, in my opinion. There's other cheaper alternatives out there, and that's the route that I decided to go. But that's my biggest con with this track system. Now, I've never done a layout or done a setup with fast track, so I can't speak firsthand exactly for everything about this track system. I do have a fast track crossing gate over on the other layout, and I haven't had much issue with that, although one of the crossing gates has taken a dump here the last couple of months. But another con, if you will, that I've read online, that I've read quite a bit, it has steel track for the track itself. The good thing is, magnet traction engines will work great on this stuff, but I've read a ton of stuff online of people complaining that this track rusts fairly easily, especially in humid climates like we're in here personally here in Florida. I've read a lot of complaints of rust on this. I've also read some people seem to experience the same issue with power drops or power outages with this track. I see quite a few threads on forums and whatnot of people complaining, just like the tubular track, they're not getting a good power distribution through the system. Again, I can't speak for that firsthand, but I'm just going off of what I've read online. But I have seen some complaints of that as well. Moving on, now we're getting to the good stuff. We're getting to my baby. I'm just kidding. But no, now we're going to check out the MTH Realtrax. This is MTH's flagship track system. Again, this is another track system with a plastic built-in roadbed, just like the fast track that we checked out. A quick note, MTH does offer a premium or a premier track system as well. At least they did. I don't know if they still do. And that was MTH Scale Tracks. But again, that's a video for a different day. That stuff is pretty few and far between. Now, this track system happens to get a bad rap from quite a few people, and it might be rightfully so, but honestly, I think a lot of that has to do with user error. In the current times that we live in nowadays, seems like everybody wants, instant satisfaction or instant gratification, if you will. And hey, I'm not on my high horse. I'm the same way with a lot of things as well. But I think that's what leads to the plague, if you will, of people complaining about this stuff. But we'll get to that in just a moment. For powering this track, or once again, getting the wires from the transformer to the track itself, MTH does sell these lock-ons that can be used with the track. On each piece of track, you'll notice there's a little knockout. Take a pair of pliers and clip this off. I'm not going to do that with this particular section of track, but you clip this off. You'll notice you got these tangs under the track, and you simply just slide this in. Now, if you don't want to go that route, once again, just like the other track systems, you can solder your wires directly to the contacts on the underside. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Some pros for this system. Honestly, my biggest pro by far is how well this track distributes power. If you take the time and do your due diligence while setting this track system up, I've yet to come across another track system that flows the power and the current throughout the entire system to the engines such as this track does. I've actually got a perfect for instance for that. This inner loop that we have over here on the second layout, to this day, is still powered by one set of feeder wires or one power lock-on, and powers the train perfectly fine throughout the entire loop. There's no power loss or power drops anywhere. It's quite impressive. Another big pro for this track system is its price. Out of the two track systems that have a built-in plastic roadbed, this is the cheaper of the two, and obviously you can see which system I ended up going with. And one last big pro for this system, it could be a pro or a con depending upon how you look at it. The rails themselves are made out of nickel, so post-war engines with magnet traction, this is not their best friend. They can't quite get the traction that they need, such as they would on steel track like Tubular or the Fastrack. However, the flip side to that is you never have to worry about rust or corrosion on your rails. That's a good trade-off in my opinion, at least here in the humidity of Florida. Moving on to cons for the MTH Realtrax, the biggest con for this track system happens to be the way that it connects to itself. You'll notice, unlike the other track systems that connect through the rails themselves, this MTH Realtrax depends on the roadbed to connect to each other. You'll see it has these clips down here that connects mechanically the track together. In fact, you can kind of see this one's a little bent up. This one's been jammed together at one time. But along with the actual mechanical track connection itself, the power connections are on the underside as well. They got these little copper or brass fingers that have to be in the proper orientation to connect to the next piece of track. And you got to figure, if you're doing a carpet layout or if you're setting this track up for like the Christmas tree and whatnot, pulling and putting together this track many times is going to affect these fingers, as well as you can see the plastic in the roadbed. Over time, these fingers start to bend and you lose an electrical connection. Or you break one of these clips off and you just don't have a good mechanical track connection to one another. Moving on with the connection issues itself, like we spoke about, unlike the other tracks that rely on the rails themselves connecting to each other, like this one is with the roadbed, since the rails don't connect together, you can sometimes end up, I don't know if you can see it, but sometimes one rail from one track might be bent inward or maybe outward, and you don't get a nice perfect seam right here. This can cause derailments or running issues and whatnot. So you really got to spend your time. I usually take a pair of needle nose and bend the tracks till they get a nice seam right there and try and make it as perfect as I can. But again, it's just a lot more hassle and a lot more work that you got to deal with. Another big con with this track system, current day or modern day if you will, is its availability. Once upon a time, this track was just as abundant and just as available as the Lionel Fastrack. However, with MTH going through their whole debacle that they're going through, availability of this track just isn't there. They haven't produced a run of Realtrax in quite a while. I think they're still producing limited quantities of it. I know they got a big batch coming here supposedly sometime soon, but it's not near as available as it used to be. Fastrack has kicked this stuff's butt in having track in the store ready for your purchase. And that's kind of a big con to me, because that was a big draw to this track system. My local hobby shops were always heavily MTH, and this stuff was always plentiful and in stock, whereas currently it is not. My last con with this Realtrax is completely subjective, but that would have to be its appearance. It's not a bad-looking track system, but when you compare this with the Lionel Fastrack system straight out of the box, in my opinion, that Fastrack system beats this stuff's butt. Again, it doesn't look that bad, but it's not necessarily the most appealing-looking system straight out of the box. That can be fixed. That's what we're doing here on my particular layout. When doing some scenery work and doing some ballasting to the track, this can become a quite attractive track setup. But again, it just requires that little bit more effort. Whereas the Fastrack looks quite a bit better straight out of the box and ready to go. Now we're walking on thin ice. This is that system I spoke about at the beginning of the video that is just plumb dangerous to have here in the train room. This, of course, is the Atlas O-Gauge 3-rail track system. And what a beautiful track system. This stuff has been out for many, many years. Personally, myself, this is another track system I've never worked with, but I'm dying to. I would love to do a layout with an Atlas O track system. This stuff just looks great. For powering this system, or getting, again, the wires from the transformer to the track, this one's a little bit different. They sell separately some different track clips that you can replace the clips that are currently on the track with, and these have wires pre-soldered or pre-installed on the clips, and then you can run these wires down under your layout and run your wiring from your transformer to the connector wires. You can power it that way. I do believe you can also solder to these clips that are already installed. I'm sure you gotta sand away the paint here on the hot rail or the inner rail, but I'm sure that would work quite as well too. Please, somebody let me know in the comments below. I'm sure somebody will have the answer. Pros for this system, of course, the big one, the obvious one, is its appearance. This is a very, very, very attractive track system. Me personally, I think this is the best looking O-Gauge track system available. This stuff even blows Ross and Gargraves out of the water. Again, that's my personal opinion. Yours may differ. But yeah, I think this is the best looking track system that you can get. And that's the big draw to it. Another big pro with this system, again, I've never worked with this, but from what I've read in the past, I don't know if they still offer it, but at least once upon a time, you could opt to either get this in a steel rail configuration or what I believe would be nickel rail. If you have older magnetraction engine, obviously you want to have steel rails for your magnetraction to bite. But if you're using modern day engines with traction tires and whatnot, you might opt to go with the other rail, be it nickel or whatever other type of metal it might be. That way you don't got to worry about rust or corrosion. I think that's a pretty nice option to have. Another pro for this track, they also sell sections of what they call flex track. This track is literally, that's exactly what it is, flexible. This isn't one, but you can radius it and turn it to fit your needs and desires for whatever your layout calls out for. I think that's a nice touch. You don't get that ability with these other track systems that we've checked out today. So yeah, that could definitely come in very handy. Some cons for this track. Honestly, the biggest con would have to come down to price. I think this is the most expensive track system available. I mean, you can understand why. We're obviously getting into the higher end scale details side of the hobby, and that fits this perfectly. But again, this is a pretty expensive track system. You got to be pretty dedicated to the hobby to make the investment into this. I know you can get this stuff used at shows and maybe online, whatnot. But again, it's still, even in the used market, a fairly expensive track system. Another big con for this system, current day or modern day if you will, is availability. Honestly, that is the number one reason why this track system is not here on my second layout at the moment. This stuff is hard as hell to get a hold of right now. Doesn't seem like they're making big batches or big production runs of this track system. You can find it in the secondary market, but again, you're still paying a pretty hefty price for it, and it's very sought after, so a lot of people seem to be hunting it down. So it's just hard to get your hands on. If my local store, Tony Roundhouse, he does carry this stuff, obviously, but there's just not an abundant supply of this stuff. So whatever he has in stock is whatever he has for quite a long while. And if you're looking to build a decent-sized layout, it's going to take a while you procure all the track to do it. My last con with this system is, again, subjective. It depends on how you're looking to use it and what you're wanting to do. But to be honest, this track system, it needs quite a bit of work in order to set up. Not necessarily the same type of work as the Realtrax, but what I'm saying is when you're getting into this track or this territory, normally you're going after a very scale and real life or real like appearance. Now you can just take this track and toss it on your table and it'll run perfectly fine just like that. But obviously that's not necessarily the most realistic or most eye-appealing setup. What you're going to want to do is get a road bed to go under it, foam, cork, whatever have you, and place the track on that. So now you're doing basically 2 runs of track, your road bed as well as your track, if you get what I'm saying. And then when you go do that, on top of that, you do have to ballast it at that point. I mean, I guess you don't really have to, but I'd say you have to. But then you have to ballast it at that point. Obviously, with this built-in road bed on the other track systems, you can get away much more easily with the road bed that's here. This doesn't look spectacular, but this can pull off the look by itself, whereas this one necessarily just can't really do that in the same manner or in the same light, if you know what I mean. But there's a quick overview of some of the mainstream, if you will, 3-rail O-gauge track systems that are currently available. If we were to look at them just from a price standpoint, here's how they line up in price from the cheapest to most expensive. Currently online, this Menards straight 10-inch straight section online cost $1.77 each. All the way up here to the Atlas O, currently a 10-inch section of this Atlas track on Train World is $7.99 a piece. Quite the array, if you will. You can see how expensive doing a layout in this stuff would get. Now, obviously, you can see which route that I went. I went with the MTH Realtrax, but that was for several reasons. The main ones being, at the time of purchase, this stuff was easily available to me. It was at my local stores, it was easy to access, it was everywhere. So that was the main draw. The second main draw was the price. Obviously, this is a little bit cheaper than the Fastrack. So, and I'm pretty budget-minded when it comes to stuff like that. So that was another big factor. And the last big reasoning, after using it for a while and becoming accustomed to it, seeing just how well this stuff disperses power throughout the layout, that's a big turn-on for me. It is a lot of work when you initially set it up, for sure, but I'd rather deal with that and know that I have a reliable track system versus setting up a run of Tubular and then after running it for a while finding low or bad spots in the track and having to go back and add feeder wires and stuff like that. But again, that's just my own personal experience. Yours may differ. Now, if someone was to ask me which track system would I recommend, there's 2 answers to this. And I just feel like, there's 2 ways of looking for me right now at the hobby. So I'm going to answer it both ways. But if I was someone new just now starting out in the hobby, looking to build my empire or grow my collection, maybe start a layout or whatnot, honestly, right now, if I was starting out, I'd go with the Fastrack. I'd go with the Fastrack just for the ease of availability and the abundance of availability. That makes a nice option. Like I say, when you're building a layout, you never know exactly what track pieces you're going to need. So if you're building and in the middle of it you need a specialty piece or another piece, again, you pick that piece up and you're up and in business within a short amount of time. Now the flip side to this coin, if somebody were to ask me that right now, which track system would I recommend after being where I'm currently at in the hobby, if I could do it all over again, absolutely. As I've already answered, we'd be doing Atlas O track. I love the way this looks. Sure, it would be quite a bit of work setting this up, but I'd love to do a layout with this stuff. I'd take the jump. I'd make the initial investment and go through all the headache, but I would love to do that at some point. I hope this answered some of your guys' questions, and I also hope that you enjoyed this little video. Maybe we'll do some more of these in the future, who knows. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. But anyways, guys, until next time, my name is Zach, and this is Country Bunkers Trains. Y'all take care. I'll see you the next go-round.